People believed Alexander Reed had everything a man could ever want: wealth, influence, and a mansion so large it seemed to touch the clouds. But inside those grand walls lived a silence that money could never fill. After the tragic passing of his wife, the once lively Reed mansion became a quiet, echoing place. Servants walked softly through the hallways, conversations were brief, and laughter had almost disappeared completely. The only sound that truly mattered to Alexander was the one he could never hear: his daughter Lily's voice. 7-year-old Lily Reed had been born deaf. After losing her mother, the little girl had grown even more withdrawn. She spent most of her time alone in the garden or quietly drawing in her room. Tutors came and went, but none stayed long. They struggled to communicate with her, and frustration often replaced patience. Alexander watched it all from a distance, buried under endless meetings and business calls. He loved his daughter deeply, but he had no idea how to reach her world. Every attempt to help seemed to fail, leaving the gap between them wider each day. That was the atmosphere in the Reed mansion the day Emily Carter arrived. Emily wasn't someone anyone would notice at first glance. She carried a simple suitcase, wore a modest dress, and greeted everyone with quiet politeness. She had been hired as part of the housekeeping staff, just another maid in a home that already had many. But Emily noticed things others ignored. On her first afternoon while dusting the hallway windows, she saw Lily sitting alone beneath a large oak tree in the garden. The little girl held a sketchbook in her lap, drawing carefully while the wind gently moved the pages. There was something about the child's lonely posture that made Emily pause. The mansion might have been silent, but Emily sensed a story waiting to be heard. And without realizing it, she had just taken the first step into a life that would soon change all three of them forever. Emily had only worked in the Reed mansion for 2 days when she noticed something unusual. Every afternoon around the same time, Lily Reed would sit in the garden beneath the old oak tree with her sketchbook. The little girl rarely looked toward the house. Instead, she focused on her drawings as if the world inside those pages was safer than the one around her. Most of the staff had grown used to the sight. They passed by the windows without paying attention, whispering about their duties and schedules. But Emily couldn't ignore it. One quiet afternoon, while sweeping the back patio, she noticed Lily struggling with something in her sketchbook. The child frowned and erased the same drawing over and over again. Emily hesitated. As a maid, she wasn't supposed to interfere with the family's affairs. Mrs. Dalton, the strict head housekeeper, had made that rule very clear on the first day. Still, something in Lily's expression reminded Emily of someone she once knew very well. Slowly, Emily approached the garden bench. Lily looked up cautiously, unsure why the new maid was standing nearby. Emily didn't speak. Instead, she gently raised her hands and signed 2 simple words. "Hello, Lily." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Lily's eyes widened with surprise. Then, almost instantly, her guarded expression softened. The little girl quickly signed back, her movements slightly unsure but filled with excitement. "You know sign language?" Emily nodded with a warm smile. Years ago, she had learned sign language while helping care for her younger brother, who had also been deaf. The language had become second nature to her. For the first time since Emily arrived at the mansion, Lily smiled. It was small, but it was real. Inside the quiet garden of a lonely billionaire's home, a simple conversation had just begun, one that no one else in the mansion even realized was happening. And it would soon change everything. Alexander Reed wasn't a man easily surprised, but the change in his daughter's behavior caught his attention. Lily laughed more often now, sometimes running through the hallways with a brightness he hadn't seen in months. For the first time since her mother's passing, she seemed happy. At first, Alexander tried to convince himself it was a coincidence. Maybe she was simply adjusting, maybe one of the tutors had finally connected. But then came the whispers. The other staff started murmuring about Emily Carter. They said she spent too much time with Lily, always hovering nearby, always smiling. Some even hinted she was manipulating the child, trying to earn Alexander's favor. The billionaire's brow furrowed as he watched the footage of Emily tidying the garden. She knelt beside Lily, teaching her small hand signs, showing her drawings with patience and care. Yet, in Alexander's mind, suspicion twisted the truth. How could a maid spend so much time with his daughter without an ulterior motive? Later that evening, Alexander confronted Mrs. Dalton. "Is there something I should know about Emily?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Mrs. Dalton hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together. "Sir, she's different. She connects with Lily in ways the other staff can't. But we must be cautious. People notice." Alexander left the room with more questions than answers. That night, he stared down at Lily's room from the hallway. She was quietly signing to Emily, teaching her how to draw a simple house with a tree. A small smile crossed Alexander's face, but the knot of suspicion lingered in his chest. He loved his daughter, but he wasn't sure he could trust this new maid. Something about Emily Carter felt impossible. And yet, even in his doubt, he couldn't ignore the fact that Lily ran to her every afternoon, hugging her tightly, as if Emily held the key to a world Alexander had long forgotten existed. The next morning, Alexander decided to confront Emily directly. He found her in the library organizing the children's books. Her hands froze mid-motion when he entered, and she stood quickly, her eyes wary. "Emily," he began, his voice firm, "we need to talk. I've noticed your time with Lily. Are you trying to manipulate her?" "To manipulate me?" Emily blinked, startled by the accusation. Her voice was steady, calm, and quiet as she responded, "No, sir. I only want Lily to feel understood. That's all." Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. "It doesn't seem that simple. She's a child, Emily. And you?" His words faltered as Lily suddenly appeared in the doorway. Without hesitation, Lily ran to Emily and wrapped her small arms around her in a tight hug. Emily's eyes softened as she returned the embrace. The scene was simple but profound. No words, just connection. Lily signed to Alexander, her little hands moving quickly. "She helps me. I like her." Alexander watched, torn between disbelief and something he hadn't felt in a long time, warmth. For months, he had believed that nothing could bridge the gap between him and his daughter. Yet here was Emily quietly crossing that distance. In that moment, Alexander realized that perhaps his suspicion had blinded him to something far more important. That evening, Alexander couldn't shake the images of Lily hugging Emily. Suspicion still lingered, though it felt weaker than before. He decided to review the mansion's security cameras, not to spy, but to see exactly what had been happening during the afternoons he hadn't been around. What he saw shocked him. Emily patiently teaching Lily the alphabet in sign language. Emily helping her draw a tree, holding Lily's tiny hand so she could get the lines right. Emily reading stories aloud with exaggerated expressions so Lily could follow the illustrations and signs. Every interaction was gentle, patient, and full of care. Not a hint of manipulation, only kindness. Alexander paused the footage on a scene where Lily clutched a small handmade card. Emily had guided her hand, helping her spell out, "I love you," in sign language. The little girl's eyes sparkled with pride as she held it out to Emily. Alexander felt a strange warmth he hadn't realized he was missing. All those days he had doubted Emily, all those moments of mistrust. It seemed trivial now. He realized that Emily wasn't just helping Lily, she was giving his daughter something Alexander couldn't. She was giving her understanding, patience, and love. For the first time, Alexander felt a twinge of regret. He had almost let jealousy and suspicion blind him to the happiness his daughter had found. And more than that, he realized how much he had been missing in Lily's life. Moments of laughter, moments of learning, moments of simple connection. Watching Lily hug Emily again and again on the footage, Alexander made a silent promise. He would no longer let distance or fear prevent him from being part of his daughter's world. And maybe, just maybe, he could let Emily in as well. The mansion had been quiet for too long. Now it was time for change. The next morning, Alexander found himself standing by the garden, watching Emily kneel beside Lily as she carefully showed her how to draw a small butterfly. For months, he had been too busy with work, too trapped in his own grief, to notice the simple joy of watching his daughter grow. He felt a mix of awe and guilt. Lily's laughter rang out like music, and she looked so happy that Alexander's chest tightened. He had been missing this. He had been missing her. Emily glanced up and caught his eye. For a brief moment, she held his gaze, unafraid, calm. It was as if she knew the thoughts running through his mind, and she gave him permission to stay, to watch, to be present. Alexander knelt beside them, awkwardly mimicking some of the signs Emily had been teaching Lily. The little girl's face lit up as she signed back, giggling when he fumbled. Emily smiled, softly encouraging him. It struck Alexander then that he had been keeping himself apart from Lily out of fear, out of pride, out of the mistaken belief that he couldn't connect. Emily had shown him that love didn't require perfection. It only required presence. For the first time he felt hope. A hope that maybe he could be the father Lily needed. And maybe, just maybe, he could trust Emily to be more than a helper in their lives. The mansion, once silent and cold, now felt alive. And in that moment, Alexander realized that the impossible truth wasn't just Emily's patience. It was that love could find a way, even where he hadn't thought it possible. Days turned into weeks. and Alexander found himself spending more time in the mansion than he had in years. He sat with Lily as she practiced sign language with Emily, laughing at the little mistakes she made and celebrating the small victories she achieved. Slowly he began learning too, clumsily forming signs with his large hands while Emily guided him with gentle patience. The bond between the three grew quietly but steadily. Lily's laughter echoed through the halls, and Alexander realized that for the first time in a long while, the mansion felt like a home instead of an empty shell. Emily had done what he could not. She had bridged the gap between him and his daughter, teaching them both that love could be expressed in gestures, not just words. One evening, after reading a story together, Lily leaned against Emily, her tiny fingers holding hers, and signed a phrase Alexander would never forget: "You make me happy." Emily smiled, touched, then looked at him, her eyes soft and knowing. He understood without words that Emily had become essential to their little family. For Alexander, the realization was profound. This quiet maid who had arrived with nothing but kindness and patience, had transformed his daughter's world, and his own. He began sharing small details about his life with Emily, conversations he hadn't shared with anyone in years. It was subtle yet powerful. Alexander's cold demeanor softened whenever Emily was near. He started noticing things he hadn't before: the way she quietly arranged the books in Lily's room, how she hummed softly when Lily struggled with a sign, how her gentle laughter blended perfectly with Lily's cheerful giggles. In those moments, Alexander understood that trust, patience, and kindness could build something stronger than wealth, status, or power. And without realizing it, a quiet, unspoken romance had begun to blossom, wrapped in hugs, smiles, and shared moments of understanding. Just as life at the Reed mansion began to feel harmonious, an unexpected threat emerged. Victor Hale, Alexander's ambitious business partner, had been watching Emily closely. Consumed with jealousy, he spread whispers that Emily was only pretending to care for Lily to secure a place in Alexander's wealth. One afternoon, Emily received a letter from Victor's lawyer, insinuating that her presence in the mansion was questionable and that her intentions might be challenged publicly. She felt a pang of fear, not for herself but for Lily. She had grown to love this little girl as though she were her own, and the thought of being separated from her filled her with dread. Alexander noticed Emily's sudden worry and confronted her gently. "Emily, what's wrong?" he asked, concerned. Holding back her fear, she explained the situation, careful not to alarm Lily. Alexander's jaw tightened. He realized that this wasn't just about rumors, this was an attack on the happiness they had all fought to build. Determined to protect both Emily and his daughter, Alexander began planning a way to handle Victor. He reassured Emily that no rumor or accusation would break the bond they had formed. Lily, sensing the tension, clutched Emily's hand tightly, signing, "Don't go." Alexander looked at Emily, and in that moment he knew that letting her leave was no longer an option. The mansion, his daughter's laughter, and the unexpected warmth in his heart depended on her presence. The morning sun streamed into the Reed mansion, but Alexander felt the weight of Victor Hale's rumors pressing down on him. He had always been a man of control, used to solving problems with power or money, but this was different. This was about protecting the people he loved most. Emily, quietly organizing Lily's art supplies, looked up as Alexander entered the room. There was worry in her eyes, but also quiet determination. Lily clutched Emily's hand tightly, her small fingers intertwined with hers. She signed, "Please stay," her wide eyes fixed on Emily. Alexander knelt beside them, feeling a surge of emotion he hadn't allowed himself in years. "Emily," he said softly, "I see everything you've done for Lily. You've brought her joy when I could not. You've taught me how to be present. And I can't imagine life without you here." Emily blinked, unsure if he truly meant it, but the sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. Alexander continued, "I will not let anyone, no one, come between us. Lily needs you. I need you. And if you'll stay, I want us to face everything together as a family." A gentle smile spread across Emily's face. She leaned down and hugged Lily, then Alexander, forming a circle of warmth and love. For the first time in months, Alexander felt whole. Not because of wealth or business victories, but because he had found trust, compassion, and a shared bond that no rumor could shake. Victor's threats and whispers would fade, Alexander knew, because some things were stronger than jealousy. Love, loyalty, and the courage to trust. Lily beamed up at them, signing quickly, "Forever." The word echoed in Alexander's mind like a promise he was finally ready to keep. Months later, the mansion was alive with laughter. Lily's giggles bounced off the walls, and her drawings covered the rooms with bright colors and stories. Emily had become more than a caretaker, she was part of the family, part of the home. Alexander watched from the doorway as Emily and Lily played a game of sign language charades. His heart swelled. He realized that in opening his home, and his heart, to Emily, he had discovered a kind of happiness he had never known before. That evening, the three of them sat beneath the old oak tree in the garden. Lily leaned against Emily, her small hand in hers, while Alexander wrapped his arm around both of them. In the quiet, Alexander signed a single phrase, slowly and carefully, "I love you both." Emily's eyes shimmered as she signed back, "We love you too." For the first time the mansion felt complete. No longer silent. No longer cold. It had become a home filled with love, laughter, and trust. Alexander understood that true wealth was not measured in money or power, but in the bonds of the heart. And as Lily's laughter echoed under the sunset, Alexander knew that their story, once full of doubt, suspicion and loneliness, had finally become one of hope, connection, and forever.